So this is a story that's been told a few times. People are familiar with it. What was it that really drew you in and made you think, I can really put a new spin on this?
Well, first of all, when I was approached about this story, it had been 11 years since the last thing that had came out, which was Paradise Lost 2. And there had been so much investigation and evidence. So it was almost like coming into a story with a totally fresh look, because I hadn't been involved in the earlier stories.
And what was it then, I guess, because you're going to spend years on this. It is, in some ways, probably going to take over your life a little bit. So when you're deciding on a project like this, that has to be a consideration, I would imagine. So tell me what it was then about this that you thought, I'm going to give up a certain portion of my life for the next little while to devote it to this.
Yeah, it's weird. You're exactly right. When I get a call, like the call that I got from New Zealand, it was basically, I had just come out of something pretty heavy, and I wasn't sure if I could commit to it, because I was like, it was just daunting. And the evidence alone was daunting. The emotional content was daunting. But there's something about this case that is so intoxicating, and there's so much information that you just feel like you have to keep going. And so I told myself, I do this little reverse psychology thing, because I understand exactly how I'm going to tell the story. Oh, it'll only take a year and a half. I told myself that. Not true.
It never takes a year or a year and a half. It's like that thing where people say, it'll just take 5 minutes. Nothing ever takes 5 minutes. And a story like this, to tell it properly, and I imagine that it's like an onion, right? The more you start to peel away the layers, you just find more layers. Right. And I think if we were to still investigate, there's still more layers to this story that weren't maybe available to you even when you were making the film, I would imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, we have been trying to get documents from the FBI for 2 years now. We FOIA'd them. There are 200 pages that were redacted from the file. What's in those pages? There are just so many things. There could be another witness that we don't know about that could come forward at a certain point,
And when does your commitment to this stop? Because the last film, Deliver Us From Evil, you mentioned, was a very heavy film. And I think you got some pushback after that came out from religious groups, as I recall the story. I mean, we spoke at the time that the movie came out. Maybe I'm misremembering. But so at what point do you just go, you know what, my art stands on its own and I'm walking away from it?
I don't know. I mean, if you asked me this at Toronto about Deliver Us From Evil, I was probably going to say the same thing. But I feel like with this story, actually, I've become very close with the producers and some of the people in the film, and I just feel like it's important to keep a tab on it. But I don't see myself doing a follow-up or anything like that. But I do want to see Damien get exonerated. So I am committed to, giving information to whomever just to continue to pursue that.
Tell me about the day that the Alford verdict was entered, because I don't want to give anything away. It's public record. People know, I think. But in the film, it could go either way. For people that don't know, I'll describe it like this. It could go either way. And the Alford plea says that you will plead guilty, but you'll be released from jail. It's little used. Frankly, it's kind of hard to understand why it exists at all. I think I know why it exists, so that you can't go back and sue for wrongful imprisonment, that sort of thing. But tell me a little bit about that day, because it had to be unsatisfying.
Well,
or mixed emotions at the very least.
Yeah. It was really 2.5 weeks. I was in New Zealand when this call came in, and I had to basically get on a plane and go down to Arkansas. And it was just, waiting to see what Jason was going to say, watching everyone kind of suffering and biting their nails to see, what was going to happen next. And the day that they were released, it hit me when I was watching Damien, when he said that he didn't want to go through another trial, and it would cost the state a lot of money, and it would cost him a lot of money. And that was the moment when I finally realized, oh, wait, this guy shouldn't have to go through this again. There's all this evidence, but you still are putting your faith in the hands of people that...
It went wrong once.
Yeah.
it could go wrong a second time.
Yeah. And the system, yes, there was a change of heart on the Supreme Court level. There was a big change of heart, but who knows? Who knows what kind of things would happen behind closed doors.
Well, locally, it seems to me that they still feel like we got the right guys, or at least publicly, that's what they want to say. We got the right guys. And so the local officials don't want to have another trial, because if these guys get exonerated, then all of a sudden they're open to lawsuits, and those pages from the FBI would no longer be redacted, I'm sure, and, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, but it struck me that it was kind of a no-win situation. And one that made me mad, frankly, when I was watching the movie, especially, and I can't remember his name.
Scott Ellington.
Yeah, Scott Ellington. His little, well, we got the right guy, and we did, infuriated me.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about Ellington is he did take the time to add up how much money it would cost the state, but he didn't take, exactly, but he didn't take the time to look at the case. Right. He was, he hadn't looked through reams and reams of paper, as he said. But he's calculating money, and it all comes down to something that I really feel strongly about, that we should not be having our justice officials should not be elected. Judges and prosecutors and people that are working within the system should be appointed.
Absolutely, and
that is too high. I mean, it's like who do they owe money to? Who do they owe favors to? Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, particularly, I mean, in the U.S., you've got studies of private jails, and judges taking kickbacks from private jails to send kids there. I had one joint on me, end up going to jail for a year for that, because the judges make money. It seems like everything really is ass backwards.
We just were talking about this downstairs. The last person who interviewed me, Howard, I don't remember his last name, but he was with the Philadelphia paper, and that's where that case came out of. And we were just talking about that because Amy Goodman did an amazing piece on that for right. Democracy Now! Yeah.
Well, it's a shocking story, and I just think of the sort of people that we're supposed to trust. Mm-hmm. And your career priests, police, exactly. Judges, all that, yeah. and it's so hard not to, and it's so difficult for people to go, you know what? We made a mistake, or we did the wrong thing, or 10 years later, a decade later, to look back and go, whoever worked that case made a mistake. Nobody wants to take culpability anymore. Even the good guys, like the, quote, good guys don't want to take culpability anymore. Yeah,
I mean, this society is thriving on the idea that we have to find somebody to blame for everything, and nobody ever wants to accept any culpability, as you said, and it's just... I mean, looking in their eyes, like Burnett, he doesn't care. He knows they didn't do it, but he does not care. Fogelman, I mean, he's burning inside. That guy, I feel like something's going to happen there with him at some point.
Well, it hasn't gone well for him.
No.
I mean, this case...
That grapefruit thing, I mean, people are mad about his theatrics. Sorry, but go ahead. Sorry.
But since then, he ran and lost, and things have not turned out, I think, the way he was sort of a golden boy, and it hasn't gone well for him. And this case seems to be kind of, in some ways, at the root of it.
I know. And the truth is, like, he said things to me like, my wife would kill me if I... said anything about that. And I mean, he's so fearful of losing the comfort zone he's in. But I mean, how can you even think like that when someone's on death row based on your actions?
Tell me about the guys today.
Yeah, okay. Well, Jesse is living in Memphis, and we took him to Chicago, and he did like a case study with the False Confessions Center, right. Steve Braga at Northwestern University, and Lauren Ryder. And he's kind of in a different situation than the other two because he's very close with his dad, who is not well. He doesn't want to be far from him, but he doesn't have much opportunity there, so it's kind of sad.
I found that from the film. Yeah. When you see him in the film, the last scene in the film, and the people that he's surrounded by, and they're thrilled to see him back. But I thought, this guy has no future here. No. And he's I don't know. But I thought he's going to end up back in jail or something weird. Something. It didn't strike me that there was going to be a really happy ending to that particular story.
And the truth is, it's good that he's in Memphis, not West Memphis,
Right.
because it's a different state. The cops in West Memphis are notorious for planting drugs in your car or, wherever. And so he's the one that we worry the most about. Jason's studying in Seattle. He's going to college and trying to get a degree, and he wants to be a lawyer. And Damien has a book coming out this month, and he's really, I've spent the most time with him, obviously. He's very happy. He's just such a beautiful spirit.
Has he adjusted well to being outside? We see him in the film shopping for Halloween gear, things. Yeah, and but has he adjusted well? Because there's a difference between the moment that you get out and then 3 months later, or a year later.
No, he's doing well. I mean, it's interesting because he is like, he's so fresh and pristine in terms of he's like a child in so many ways. So he's just always learning something new and taking it in a man's body, which is great. Yeah. So
the internet, it's a new thing because it wouldn't have existed when he went to jail.
Oh my God, Twitter, Instagram. I'm constantly getting requests. Will you follow me on something I've never heard of?
Pinterest and Foursquare.
Yeah, Foursquare. Yeah, he sent me that the other day. I'm like, what is this? I feel like I have to stay on top of it for Damien. Yeah. But anyway, so he's happy.
Oh, good. And what's your background in terms of? Well, no, that's not. What exactly is it that draws you towards these subjects? I mean, will you ever make a documentary that is
about sunshine?
About sunshine and how to.
Corgis.
Yeah,
I love corgis.
Do you?
I have a corgi.
So this is our queen.
Yeah, I have a corgi.
Do you?
I don't know. I don't look at it as dark, but I think I'm interested in complicated issues that have a gray area that needs to be explored. It's very interesting to me that we label people for everything, and I'm so interested in not labeling and trying to find out the why of it all. So.
Well, this movie is all about that. I mean, this movie is a perfect example. I mean, Deliver Us from Evil, same idea. I mean, we label the priest in that film as a good man, and it turns out not so much. But in this film, it's about kids who wear long Matrix-style jackets and are perceived as different in their what look to me like rural. I mean, it's bigger than a village, not a small town. I guess just small town.
Yeah, it's a very isolated small town too.
With not a lot of exposure to people different from the people that have lived there for generations, probably.
Right. And, with the very strong religious influence there was just not a lot of pop culture. And so someone like Damien is going to be struggling consistently.
Well, it was interesting because the portrait that was painted of him for me in the movie was a troubled kid who was, for my money, troubled because he was smarter than the people that he was around and stifled by that, probably frustrated by that, and, interested in darker things. I mean, he read about Satanism, all that stuff, which, frankly, a lot of kids do. I mean, this is not unusual here in a large city like we're sitting in right now. But there, it must have blown some minds, particularly, I think, at the time, because you interview the fellow with the white hair and the beard, the satanic cult expert. Yeah, he's something.
Yeah. I mean, it's a normal exploration. He was into actually Wicca, and that was considered satanic, and it's such a peaceful kind of way. So it's really too bad.
Yeah. It was interesting to me, the whole satanic cult thing, because what I was picking up from him is that he didn't really particularly know anything about, anything. It was a lot of supposition. It was a lot of ideas. It was a lot of maybe he read in a book one time that, and yet in a court of law, his opinion was taken seriously.
Yeah. I mean, it's like people that needed some kind of notoriety and here, these are people that I don't know, he wasn't making a lot of money. He was working a job that he was trying to find power within this organization, and here's an opportunity to prove that you know what you're talking about, and he jumped on that. So
So is this a perfect storm then? A perfect storm of having three outsider kids in a community not used to it, having, an ambitious district attorney, the satanic expert who really wanted to make a name for himself and a few extra bucks and get on Geraldo, that kind of thing?
That's exactly what it was. It was a perfect storm.
And what did you learn then throughout this process that surprised you?
I think that just like the idea that the truth and faith, you can try to tamper with them or you can try to hide them, but I feel like the truth always pays off in the long run if you stick with it, And Damien was unwavering in his truth from day one, and at the end of the day, he's now a free man.
By Halloween. Yeah, sort of. Well, see, that's the thing. And that, again, real life's not always all that satisfying,
right.
and the way I felt at the end of the movie, because, the movie does such a wonderful job of piecing the evidence together, and you think, well, this is obvious.
Right.
The outcome of this is going to be obvious, because I knew they were free. I had forgotten about or didn't know about the Alfred plea. And so by the time we got to that, I found it enormously frustrating.
It's in the moment it was the right thing to do,
right.
But it's always going to hinder him in some way and the fact that he has to be identified by this case that he should have never been involved with is so dark for him to be a West Memphis 3.
That's right. And he'll always be that. It's interesting. He's got a book coming out. He was a producer on this film. Can you envision a time in his life, and this is a question for him really, but can you envision where it'll be enough? I'm not going to discuss this publicly anymore. I'm not going to write about it. I'm not going to be that guy anymore.
I mean, the thing is, how does he make a living? Yeah. This is the only thing he has to make a living right now. He's had all of his earning years taken away from him.
And schooling and all that.
So, I think schooling, he did get his education. He's smarter than most people I know. But he owns this story now, and I think that's the only thing he has in order to at least try to earn a living. So I think he'll have to stick with it for a while. But, there might be a point where he can walk away from it. I hope so for his sake, because I know he doesn't want to be defined by it.
When you first met Lori, tell me your impression about Lori. I think that we've all heard stories about women who fall in love with people who are in jail and they get married, and it strikes me as an outsider to all of that culture, and that it can't be particularly satisfying, and that often I think you have desperate people attracted to desperate people, and it's not always a healthy relationship. This one seems to work, though.
She came from a different place. She wasn't coming from a desperate perspective looking for love. She was actually coming from a person who wanted to help someone who needed help. So that bonded them.
And when you first met her, what was your take on her?
I was really busy when I got the call, and so I didn't have a lot of time to think about who this person was and the case and everything. So I met her and I just kind of got her right away. I understood. So I never had that cliche image in my brain, but we did talk about it afterwards, and it was kind of like it could have gone either way. But she dispels that myth immediately.
Well, she does in the film too. I mean, that was a revelation for me, because I knew that aspect of the story. I knew that Damien, or I knew certainly one of them was married. I'm not sure if I knew all the details going in. It's hard to, it's all blurry for me now. I can't remember, and I knew one of them was married, and again, I had an idea of what that relationship might be, and that goes out the window very quickly in the film.
Yeah, that's great. She's really such an amazing person.
I'll let you go after one more question. Okay. There are lots of archival materials in the film, and the audience that I saw it with was I live here, so I see everything in advance.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of us in the theater, though, and the pictures of the young boys really upset people. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the decisions made to include those in. As a filmmaker, I think you have to show the horror of the crime, but there are upsetting images of little boys who are hogtied and...
Yeah, I mean, I think that those were used in such excess in the trial, and these were the images that the jury and the witnesses and the audience, obviously, were being shown all the way throughout these trials, and this is how these guys got convicted. But in terms of like the autopsy photos, we needed to convince the audience that these turtles were capable of doing this, and so it was difficult because I was finding myself, I couldn't look at those in the beginning, and then I was finding myself desensitized by the time I finished editing, and it was tough. It was a tough choice, but everyone kind of felt like that was the right thing to do because Michael Carson was talking about how he was on the stand trying to give his statements, and they had all these pictures sitting next to him while he's, trying to testify. And he was lying and being, convinced that his lie was actually helping because that murder was bad. And so I guess,
Yeah, the turtle evidence is I mean, but I think when you say about being desensitized, if you speak to police who have been homicide cops for a long time, if you talk to anyone who works in a newsroom, and, anything that is has a darker edge to it, people find a different way to process it.
Yeah.
And you do get desensitized, I guess, a little
And
bit.
yeah, except for these guys did not get desensitized to it because all of these police officers, the prosecutor, the juvenile parole officer, I talked to all of them. All of them talk about these pictures and how if you saw those pictures, you would have done this. And that's another aspect of why we had to show them. I mean, these guys were talking about their own kids. That's not supposed to happen. You're supposed to have you're supposed to have a trained official who is not going to get emotional. And every single one of them was emotional. So that's why it happened. That's exactly why they got convicted, was because emotions ruled out over science.
Amy, thank you so much.